Hey everyone, this is Tony Mandarich, and I am today's guest on the T.E.A.M Podcast, where the conversation is conscious. Let's do this thing.
And that was my good friend, Tony Mandarich, and we would like to thank you for joining the conversation. My name is John Sterling, host and originator of the T.E.A.M Podcast, where team is a familiar word within my guest's lived experience. On this platform, team represents the elements of transition, empowerment, advocacy, and mindset, exposed in a conscious conversation driven by a community for authentic connection. That being said, our brand of engagement will not only empower you as an individual, but the entire culture as a team. I hope you enjoy. Tony, boy, I tell you, brother, this is a long time coming. We have had a not so long relationship, but I was chronicling in my mind how this whole thing came together. So I'm this guy that feels like if there's something I think's important and there's a person on the other end that I think I can reach out to that might close the loop on some things that I'm interested in. At this time, I was involved with a organization that was bringing together combat veterans and retired professional athletes. And the big buzzword was transition. So me and my infinite wisdom, I ran across this Tony Mandarich cat that I had formerly known, same age, same generation, and thought, God, what a great story. However, he'll never call me, right? So I reached out, and I'm literally heading up I-20 west to Atlanta one day, and I've got a former Marine in my vehicle to the right, and I get this call from Lansing, Michigan.
I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, right. Laughable. At this point, I'd forgotten about that, and there's no reason why anyone from Lansing, Michigan should call. So I simply answer the phone, which isn't protocol for me. And who do I hear but you?
You must have been like, who the heck is this?
No, I knew exactly who it was. And I looked at my friend, Chris Rodriguez, and I said, I mouthed it. I said, do you know who this is? And he said, yes, right, with a look on his face like, but I know it's not him. There's no way, right? And so it was you. So fast forward, we meet because you determined that engagement, somehow had efficacy in the large scheme of things, right? And so then we are in July of the same year, meeting out in the sizzling but yet beautiful, pristine desert of Scottsdale, Arizona, at a Barnes and Noble, probably 5 feet from the entrance because I chose, like an idiot, a place where everyone could see us, but that's what it was, right? What I thought was going to be a courtesy interview / meeting turned into something a lot more substantial. And again, this is the title of this episode, this conversation.
Yeah. Every person. And I mean, every person matters.
Everyone. Every person matters. Whether you said people, every person, we'll craft that. But the bottom line is human beings in your architecture of thought matter. And that's what I asked you at the end. I said, man, I can't believe we've been sitting here for multiple hours as virtual strangers, but you determined that this conversation was worth having. Yeah. And we've had subsequent many, many, many conversations since then. And the idea behind T.E.A.M, as I've explained to you, and we'll reiterate to the audience, is that this construct of team is not just a word. It needs to be fleshed out. It needs to be given some depth. And so we talk about team as transition, empowerment, advocacy, mindset. And when I first got an opportunity to meet you, I realized real quickly that this is a home run on every level. And what I'm thinking about is one of the first people I introduced you to was a guy named Harrison Bernstein, who you subsequently, that's another laugher, right? It's like, Harrison Bernstein, the guy that doesn't know you, but exactly. Oh, by the way, lives in your apartment complex.
All the places.
Right. But one thing I heard you say, and this isn't to toot my own horn, this is more to get to some of the things we're going to be talking about later. It's the curiosity factor. I believe, I'm thinking it was either his podcast or another podcast that I connected you with my barber, where you basically made the statement when you met with me the first time and did your research, I was an individual that you felt like was worth getting together with because of some of the inherent things you saw as part of kind of my bio and who I was. Explain that, because that's a really important thing as we develop teams around us of people.
There's two different common phrases used these days. One in kind of like the corporate world where they call it due diligence. Somebody doing their due diligence on a company, even an investor doing a due diligence on a company before they invest, looking at their quarterlies. And then in politics, there's something called vetting, where they check somebody's background out, whether they're a Supreme Court justice or somebody appointed for something, or it doesn't matter what it is. And it's no different than what I was doing, except I was doing it in whatever you call it. Like, I was just checking you out to see if you were legit and what you stood for and what you believed in, or was this somebody that just wanted to interview or meet people that had, been in the NFL or was a sports fan or whatever their motive is. And 99% of the time, their motive is not a bad one. It's a good one. But it's, if you meet with everybody that requests a meeting,
right,
I have no life. Like I can't live. Like there's nothing I can do for my own stuff, my own things that drive me. So I'm very picky on who I, spend time with. And especially now, getting middle-aged, I'll say 54, time is more valuable now. So who I spend it with and how I spend my time is extremely important to me. And that's just the cold hard facts. That's being transparent. And that's just the way it is for me. I don't want to waste my time doing something just to make somebody else happy, yet I hate being there or hate doing this. It's like, I'd rather be honest and transparent with them and say, look, I really don't want to go. But if it means a ton to you for me to go and support you, or for me to go and be there for you, I will then go because it's important to you. If it's somebody like you or somebody close, a very close friend or something. But I won't go just to appease people and I don't ask that of other people. So I did my, if you will, my due diligence on you, which, took me 5 or 10 minutes. I can weed it out pretty quickly. I can see the riffraff. If you know how to con people, if you know how to be riffraff, if you know how to BS people, if you know the right catchphrases to say that are really all BS, I know those because I used to do that for a decade, so I can pick it up really easily. So I wasn't getting any of those red flags when I was checking out your stuff. And then obviously things like talking to you on the phone, I don't know if other people can tell when they do this kind of analysis or observation. I could tell you're not, you're legit. You are about what you stand for, what we talked about. And I was like, well, those are the kind of people I want to meet. It wasn't like I don't want the listeners to think, I know neither one of us were thinking, hey, this is going to be a monetary thing. How can he help me monetarily, or how can I help him monetarily with my network? It was more of a, hey, let's just meet and see and get to know each other better. And what I kind of set an hour aside, and we ended up being there 3-4 hours, and it went by so fast. And that's when I know, when I lose track of time, I know I'm doing the right thing, or I'm in where I should be. And then that happened with Harrison too, right? When you introduced me and Harrison. But the things you stood for, the things you believed in, the things you did when you were already an adult and started to do something that you wanted to do, like entering the military, and I hate to use that phrase because I think it's overused, of mad respect. But it's like, I have like crazy respect for the military, all branches, just as much as an infantry as I do as a Navy SEAL, because they all are putting their lives on the line. A lot of them don't see combat. Probably most of them don't see combat. But you know what? In the back of their minds, they know that they might see combat. I know I won't, because I'm not in it, right? I mean, I'm from Canada. In the Navy, we have like 4 canoes, right?
That's badass.
And a styrofoam airplane. I mean,
some Nerf missiles.
The thing that I think both left that conversation with was that we saw the world the same way in this respect, especially that every person does matter. Like everybody matters.
That's a Tony Mandarich answer. And it's similar to a John Sterling answer, because we are never short on verbiage. But it's because
So wrapping up the podcast.
yeah, exactly. So thanks for your time, folks.
Right.
No, the point being is, and I think this illustrates that really at the end of the day, you're a man of purpose and passion in the things you're trying to connect yourself with. Let's just call you a guy that's been in the game for a half century. I say that to myself, right? We're a half century old, right?
Yep.
So we want to round out the last half of life with doing things that matter, the things that are going to be, congruent with our values. We're not willing to compromise that. Although I think you, like me, will spend time with individuals and people and organizations from a cultural understanding perspective that expand our, aperture on life. But here's something that I heard you say that I think ties into this conversation. And it's about the camaraderie that you left behind when you were in the league. And we know that has so much to do with shared lived experiences and a lot of really tough stuff that we go through on a physical level that binds us together. But you made statements a couple times that, here you are at 54 years old and you've not found the camaraderie in your life, that a simple thing like a locker room and everything surrounding that provided you, whether that be the college locker room, professional locker room, and even despite being involved in groups like, 12-step programs. And, again, we want to recognize that you're beyond 25 years of sobriety now. Even those things didn't do it for you. What, is that a common link in the thread you weave through relationships, that if you're going to find camaraderie and significance, you're really trying to seek out those kind of people?
It's crucial. It is absolutely crucial. It's crucial who you surround yourself with. Now, I was lucky, to be in the football arena, and the thing I miss the most is that camaraderie. I mean, you miss game day, of course, but you miss the camaraderie, all the fighting, all the blood, sweat, and tears of camp, and then all the unity together, and all of this stuff. And the closest it's gotten has been a 12-step program, because when you walk into a 12-step meeting, there's these things called open meetings and closed meetings. Closed meetings are meaning you have to be a person in recovery because they'll share more intimate things. There's open meetings where you can bring somebody who's not in recovery but is trying to understand how this whole thing works. So the one thing that a lot of people won't say, but it's a fact, this is true. When you walk into a 12-step meeting, and I won't say the letters because that would be breaking traditions. So I'll say a 12-step meeting, and everybody pretty much knows what I'm talking about. You will see before the meeting, 15, 20 minutes before you will see people smiling, laughing, sometimes howling, laughing. You'll see people that are just like you see all the time. You'll be, hey, what's up? How are you? Some people you're closer with, some people you're just acquaintances with. And you'll see the people that are hurting. You'll see the people that are still shaking because they're going through, withdrawals. But there's a room of sick individuals. Like when I say sick, it's not like to be funny. I mean, ill, like spiritually ill, mentally ill, mental illness is in there. There's more of it in those rooms than there is, say, in a Rotary Club meeting. Okay. So a lot of people, sometimes when I bring a newcomer in that is not sure if they are an alcoholic or a drug addict, and I say, hey, look, if you want to check it out. And they'll be like, why is everybody laughing? Are they fake? They're not fake laughing. I can tell they're not fake laughing. This is not a show. I mean, it's like people are generally laughing, and it's because, they can laugh at themselves, thank God, and laugh at some of the nonsense we've done and don't have to do anymore. And sometimes we're laughing just about what happened today. That has nothing to do with, something that happened in our past. So it's because we've gotten ourselves physically cleaned up, detox, sober, doesn't matter what the chemical is or the addiction, and done work on ourselves to change ourselves and found a new way of life. And it's a much easier, softer way of life that is to live. So, and when you take that dichotomy and that comparison of that misery of that alcoholic life to now being like, I don't have to drink, and I'm happy, and I'm laughing, and I have friends, and I'm reliable, and I'm employable, and I can help, my fellow man. It's like, what is there not to laugh about? We've been given a second chance. And so it's like, I don't want to, don't screw it up. Some of us go back out. Luckily, I haven't had to go back out and test the waters, because I see enough people that do, and none of them have come back. The ones that have come back, that have lived and come back, none of them have said it got better, because if it got better, they wouldn't have came back. The camaraderie that we share, the unspoken camaraderie, is that feeling of desperation in that room. At one point in our lives, we all felt that. And an alcoholic's desperation is no different than most people's desperation if their life is on the line. I'm not talking about desperate for your team to win. I'm talking about if your life is on the line and you don't know what to do and you're lost with direction, that's desperation. And luckily, I was blessed with enough desperation to change it, to be like, I don't like this feeling. So we share that bond in those meeting rooms, and outside those meeting rooms. When we talk to people, I talk to people every day on the phone that are in the program and that are not in the program, like yourself, that live the same kind of way, and they think a very similar way. Of course, everybody's going to have their nuances on different angles, but for the most part, the foundation and the core and the code of honor that we live by for our personal selves is pretty much in line. So that's the closest I've been able to come to that camaraderie is in those rooms. And it's still not like it was in the locker room.
No, and I wouldn't imagine it is, but going through some of the things and seeing some of the things I've seen in the environments with separated service members, athletes, even something as simple as going through a really rigorous physical workout together, and you just met that person a half an hour ago, but you shared that life experience, is really telling. And so I don't think a lot of people would see that coming, that a guy like you would be in a position to literally correlate an NFL, not that it's equal, but just correlational, an NFL experience, locker room, through the grind, all the stuff you go through in training camp, and a life-challenging event like, trying to get to the point where you're sober with people otherwise who you'd have zero in common with. That's liberating. And that's going to touch on our next area of empowerment. But my next question is, and this is around the curiosity that really is, I think, required to even continue down this road, because I think curiosity is what allows us to become more interested in other people and their stories and sharing ours. And you've done some really interesting, I'll consider it research, even though you're just doing podcasts. You've been on, or you've had some guests. I'm thinking about Dr. Sifu, and just intriguing conversations. I listened to that thing. Yeah, great guy. I listened to that interview cover to cover. And you guys talked about the process you go through in the NFL of the stresses and the strains just in order to maintain a label and an identity, right? And what we're willing to go through. But then there's that transition point, and you just described something that is the same stress and strain and grind to maintain your life. Am I seeing that correctly?
You're spot on with. It's just looked at, I believe, like you had said something a few seconds ago that, it wasn't at the level of like the camaraderie at the NFL. And you were using the example of somebody meets somebody at the gym and they work out and they have a great hard workout together. They really don't know each other, but you know what? It is different, but it's the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing. It's just like if you take a hammer and hit somebody in the head with it that plays in the NFL, and if you take a hammer and hit somebody in the head that doesn't play in the NFL, it's going to hurt the same. There's gravity, there's metal, there's all these things involved, force and angles and all these things. So yes, it is different in a lot of ways, but in more ways, it's the same.
Right.
And just because my experience was, I was surrounded by 53 guys that were really laser focused their whole life or most of their life, because you pretty much have to be to get to a level of any sport that's professional or any professional, career, whether, or there's going to be special skills that a SEAL, a Ranger, a Beret, or people in the Delta Force that they have that say, boots on the ground doesn't have. But they all need each other. They're still necessary because one can't survive without the other. And that's why it was always stressed even from college football to pro football. Head coach would always remind us, and our assistant coaches position coaches would remind us that everybody in the building matters. I don't care if it's the person setting up the catering for lunch. I don't care if it's the film guys that are cutting the film. Back then, way back in the day, they were cutting film. Whether it is one of the executives up front, whether they're a VP, an executive VP, an administrative assistant to a VP, the janitor, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Equipment person, the trainers, the people that, clean the ice tubs, they all matter. Once you start to take a spoke out of that wheel, if it's all spokes in the wheel and you start taking one out, yeah, it's still going to function. It's just not going to function as well. It's still going to function, but you start taking two spokes out and you're going to get some weakening, and you start pulling spokes here and there and you're going to crumble. You're going to have a weak foundation.
No, you're exactly right. And what I love about that is that people in the inside of 1% that represented what you did can relate to this, but then you drill it down to individuals who you wouldn't necessarily connect as connected. Like you said, it's symbiotic, which spells to me ecosystem. Like we have to be a part of this. We all survive together. So in light of that, I'm thinking about the idea of empowerment, and at every level, and I say level loosely because we don't want to create, distance where we don't have to between people, because we all do matter. But there is an opportunity to meet people where they're at, right? Yeah. Because we've been so many different places. And I remember the first time that I was starting this team concept, and we had a summit, and there was a former captain. He's now 70 some years old in Vietnam. And he said his unit was known and people pursued getting in that unit because he, as a leader, as a commander, knew how to meet people where they were at.
Right.
And I'm thinking on a really basic level, a story that I heard you tell that I think really illustrates this. And I got a visual in my mind, and I want to be really visual with this description. But I'm imagining Tony Mandarich, whose arms are as big as my waist, who is just a physically imposing human being and can look however he wants. He mentioned in this particular narrative that he typically has headphones in. He's got his hat pulled down over his skull. So that is a general sign and posture of leave me alone.
Do not approach.
Do not approach. But yet you have the novice individual in the gym that may or may not know who you are, but knows you're somebody, and you might have spent a day in the gym, come up to you and ask you a simple question about the fact that he's doing the bench with, 4 reps of this or what, just some generic thing. And in your mind, you're thinking, what were you thinking?
Don't say verbally what I'm thinking.
Yeah. So you were thinking explicitive, but what did you do because that guy or gal, whoever they were, mattered? What did you actually do to meet them where they were at?
I'll preface this by saying I would do this regardless, but there's accounts in my life where always somebody that did it for me. And if they took the time to do it for me, and it could have been 5 years ago, it could have been 25, 30 years ago. It doesn't matter. In my mind, I was like thinking, are you effing kidding me that you're asking me this question? But I had a different life experience than he did because that was my job. So this guy's trying to learn. I didn't have all the answers when I was at his level. I still don't have all the answers at 54. And I don't think I ever will, thank God, because I want to keep learning. Because I think it's learning and sharing is necessary, for the well-being of our own selves and who we are as humans. So he had more or less asked a very simple question of, do you mind if I ask you a question? And I saw him coming towards me. So I kind of took my headphones off and became more approachable. He said, I don't want to bother you. He said, I do, this is what I do for chest. This is what I do. I do 4 sets of 8 of bench press. Then I do dumbbell press or fly or whatever other exercise he did. And then he said, am I doing chest correctly? Am I doing it right? So that's where all the expletives came into my head. But I was like, okay, well, he doesn't know. And then I put myself in his shoes. And all of this stuff I'm describing happens in a matter of 2 seconds. Me in my head. This guy has the courage to walk up to a stranger and ask a question, basically saying, I don't know the answer to, and I'm just wondering if you have any suggestions. He's asking for help. So then in that 2 or 3 second period, I think to myself, wow, what a great opportunity to help my fellow man. Mm. And then I just forget about that. And then I go into asking him questions that are not demeaning, that are not insulting, that are not whatever. I ask him questions for solution based.
That's an amazing narrative because, again, what I'm trying to get people to do, and the listeners, whether they know you or not, I'm having this really tough struggle because we are old and Tony Mandarich might not be relevant to people in this day and age. But if they do a little homework, he becomes really relevant. But the reason I want him to become relevant in the context of this conversation about T.E.A.M is that the cover of the book, 6'6", 300 pounds, not so much anymore, whatever, but a humongous individual that has every indication that they might do exactly what you said you didn't do, be dismissive, be, just disrespectful, condescending.
You can say it.
Right? All those things. The bottom line is, on the cover, is anyone thinking that's the case? I'm pretty sure it's not. And then when you disarm the individual through your body language, taking out the earphones, giving him more than he actually asked for. So this speaks to this idea of not only meeting people where they're at, but creating a legacy around that so people can follow your example. And I know I've talked to a number of different athletes that have children, right? And I think sometimes we can, based on that identity piece, that label piece we talked about before, make the mistake of having our immediate families view us as said athlete or whatever that iconic figure is, as opposed to one of my guys the other day that I was interviewing said, Dad, the baseball player versus Dad, the dad, and the accountability around that. What you just described to me really sounds like a child coming for advice and information and, being undergirded because they don't understand. And I know that's really important to you as a father. And so I know you've got at least one daughter. Do you have 2 daughters?
Yeah, I have 2 daughters.
2 daughters. So you got it doubly what I've been blessed with. I got 1. That's enough. But there's an interesting nuance and an interesting privilege we have. But how do we create legacy around empowering our daughters? This is a big question. I want you to just kind of give me your thoughts on that.
It's a great question. It's probably one of the most important questions you've asked today or we're going to talk about. So to be totally transparent, I mean, I love my daughters. I love them to death and I will fight to the death for them till the day I die, till the end of my days. My parenting has not been A+. I wasn't always there. I was there a lot, for that. When I was drinking, this is not going way back. I was there, but I wasn't there because I was so checked out, right? Circumstances of that a lot of people will be able to relate to, like divorces or whatever. Then there's, the separation of families and visiting times and all this and all that. So my relationship with both of my daughters as of right now, today, and this is being transparent, is the worst it's ever been in my life.
Wow. Truth, brother. No, I got it.
And I would say this. I'm not going to soften anything, because I'll be totally transparent because it's part of my code. 2 years ago, I would have said, and the relationship was rocky, but it wasn't like it is now. 2 years ago, I would have said, I expected out of my daughters what I expect out of myself. I don't expect them to play in the NFL. I expect everything, like whatever you do, it's, full speed and do it right. And if you want something, make a plan. I don't have all the answers. There's a lot of ways to the top of a mountain or the bottom of a valley. There's a lot of different routes to get there. I can only share my experiences with you. I would have said that 2 years ago, that my expectations of them that I had set were the same ones I set upon myself, I'm very hard on myself. I believe there's some circumstances that have happened that have kind of made me really go, kind of like, really like caught me out of left field, and still trying to figure that out, what's going on there. But it's so out of left field that I had I wasn't numb, and I had no emotion to it, because I was like, I just didn't understand. I still really don't understand what the deal is, but I guess I want to say the current thing, which I think is very important. And this is not just for this example. This is for me, for anybody in any situation in life. I always ask myself when I do something, it's like, what's your motive? What's your motive? Is your motive a good one? Is it a bad one? Is it a malicious one? Is it a condescending one? Is it to empower somebody? Is it to brag about yourself? Is it, whatever the motive is, I always ask myself, what's my motive? Because your inner gut feeling and your inner soul won't lie to you. Even if you open your mouth and say something different, you know what your motive is. So I don't know what the motive is, what's going on right now. I know what's been said, but I don't know what's going on. And it's right where it's supposed to be right now. And I accept that. Right. And I'm, you know what? I don't want to say, I'm good with it, but I'm not good with it. If that makes any sense.
No, I got it.
I want to be in their lives. And I've told them that.
Right.
And the last conversations we've had, which has been over a year ago, I've told them, I want to be in your life. I want to, but it's seen different, and they're not wrong. And in no way am I dismissing anything that they say or said or are. It's like that. If that's what they believe, if that's what you believe, and that's your truth, I respect that. But please give me the respect of hearing mine, which I haven't been given. And this all goes to, in my opinion, and this is an assumption, and assumptions are dangerous, but this is an assumption, comes down to who you surround yourself with is crucial.
That's deep, brother. And, it's interesting you said that, because the next thing I was going to talk about with regard to empowerment, and this is kind of a road that goes both ways. We empower, we become empowered, but who you surround yourself with has a lot to do with accountability.
Yes.
Right. And so you said at one point, you're going to call a spade for yourself, right?
Especially if it's me.
Right. Especially if it's you. And if you have a good friend, they will help you through the process and make that really clear as to what's going on. And so that's really interesting. You find that in this kind of void of understanding with your daughter, whoever it is, that you have at least sounding boards of accountability where people can just kind of massage you through that process?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And it's not just anybody, right? It's people that I hold in high regard, that I look at their life and I'm like, I would hold those people in high standard on their principles, what they believe in, and how they live. And then I've also gone to professionals in whether it's professional therapist or whatever, just to get a professional's, I don't want to say their take on it, but just, and I always say, look, even I said to the professional, you're only hearing one side of the story, my side, and I'm only sharing with you what I've been told. So there's always two sides to a story. It's just a fact. There's always two sides to a divorce. There's always two sides, and there's always a reason, why an X is an X. And that's not in a demeaning way, because I'm an X, right? So it's like, there's a lot of failures I've had in my life.
Sure.
And there's some successes I've had in my life. But I'm not going to live in a cave. I'm not going to be afraid to fail. And I'm not going to be afraid to be who I really am. I don't need to stand with a megaphone saying, hey, I'm sober X amount of years. Hey, this, hey, that. That's not what it's about. What it is, it's about, okay, look, if we go way back, got an email from you. You kind of gave a summarization of if you'd be interested in talking, this is what I'm doing. I did my due diligence. I called you. Next time you're in AZ, we met and had coffee. And then we've done a multitude of things in between then and now. So all that rapport building and all that stuff. So it's like, I look at what you've done over the last year and a half, 2 years, and you're the guy that I sat with for 4 hours. The things you talked about, you do, and you were doing already, and you continue to do. So at 54, looking back at my life and totally acknowledged football, and I lived the dream I wanted to, and got to do the dream I wanted to do as a kid. Today, I look at that as, in the bigger picture, as that was a platform for today to be able to reach people, to carry the message that you and I are talking about today. And mine doesn't specifically have to be strictly about sobriety, because it's not just about sobriety, because there's a lot of people that don't drink that are miserable. It's how do you live today? And really, that's what matters the most. And it's not to negate or, kind of say, oh yeah, I played football, whatever, and this and that. It's like, no, I acknowledge it and I appreciate it and I'm grateful I did. But what's more important is, what are you doing today? Because today's today. Today's not 1989. And I don't want to live off of 1989 or which was, second pick. I don't want to live off of 1992, which was on the cover, one of the biggest busts in the NFL. I don't want to live on 1997 or 1996 comeback player of the year for the Colts. That's great. It's all great stuff. And I appreciate it. And I can look at it, but I won't stare at it. Because what matters is, what am I doing today about, my life and adding things into the stream of life? COVID year has been a great year for me because I love to observe people. And it's been a great year for me to observe myself and my own behaviors. Why do I do what I do? Why do I act the way I act? It got me going because the back burner project was my podcast. Well, with restrictions of photography and other stuff and physical contact with people, the back burner project now became a front burner project. And I started my podcast. And then, and other projects that I wanted to do. So, there's been many blessings. I think maybe one of the greatest things in the world, in the history of the world, of phenomenons that will go down is the COVID toilet paper crisis.
And it's still going on.
I still don't get it.
Yeah.
So, and that's what intrigues me about human behavior.
Right. Well, what's interesting about that answer is it started in a granular, fashion with your daughters, and some clearly, no one can see your face. I can see your face right now because we're on this Zoom call, but it was clearly a clear, current, and ongoing issue when we started talking about that. But what I was thinking is about this whole mindset piece is that what I've seen, and you've said a number of things, so it's really interesting to me that you kind of have a mantra of the things you're thinking. You're very consistent in your thought process. But what I see is a continuation of a posture of curiosity, which puts you in a position where when judgment begins, curiosity ends. Like, you've determined what the issue is, you've determined right and wrong, and you're no longer intrigued about your environment. So even if it's, man, this has been a really crappy year and change with my kids, but I'm still intrigued because frankly, I don't understand.
Right.
Or the idea that, I'm going to engage, people on my podcast that have personal lived experience with bipolar disorder. And I'm curious, and I was even listening to that interview, and frankly, just in a similar way that you just described what was going on with your kids, when you were trying to articulate the bipolar conversation, it was very clunky. It was very because you didn't get it. And,
I didn't, yeah.
Right. And you're trying to get it. And so to
me, I was the guy asking the guy about, am I doing chest right?
Exactly. But see how that translates? Like within a half an hour or less, we've taken how do you do chest, really low level conversation to bipolar disorder. And the same thread runs through it, which is I'm asking you a question because I don't know.
Exactly.
And that to me is the disarming part about kind of where I wanted to end up with this conversation, because at the end of the day, there are some things that we just don't know. And one of the things that is pervasive in our culture, but yet very subjective to the experience of the individual, is this idea of, and I'm saying mindset. So when we think of mindset, we're thinking of maybe high level stuff and growth mindset and all these things on a theoretical and academic level. But how about bipolar? How about my son dealing with generalized anxiety disorder? And how do we create a culture? And I just want you to think about your environment, right? Whether you're walking in a gym and you got a freaking world-class bodybuilder, or you know a friend that's a former athlete, or your immediate family. How do we take everything that you've been talking about and your posture towards human beings, because they do matter, and have a disarming and respectful engagement with people that are dealing with a behavioral health issue that we don't understand?
I think it's really a simple answer, but there's obviously a lot of variables to it. But the answer for me is just be transparent and honest. If you don't know, ask. And if you want to know but are afraid to ask, then find out through a professional or by research from, accredited, whether it's a case study or whatever it is, a paper, a thesis, something on whatever the case may be, whether it's bipolar, whether it's a nutrition supplement, or whether it's a theory of relativity, right? It doesn't matter what it is. It's if you're on, like people, there's a word starting to be used more and more that I'm glad it's being used, but it'll get overused recently, and it's starting on the internet, and it's the word authenticity. Okay. Well, shouldn't we have been doing that the whole time? Is the first question I ask myself is, shouldn't we have been authentic and transparent and honest the whole time? And I'll be the first to say, I'll call a spade, because I was the furthest thing from those words when I was drinking. I was some of those things in my sobriety. Just because you get sober physically from the drink or the chemical or whatever the addiction is, sex, eating, fast, like moving, jumping out of air, but it doesn't matter what it is. If it controls your life, it's like, you got to figure out, like, why am I doing this? Why is this filling a void that, I can't fill? And I ask myself that question because in sobriety, I did things years ago that I wasn't proud of. And I would literally have that conversation with somebody and like a person in sobriety, or with, kind of like that conversation with myself, more of a reflection, because a conversation with myself is dangerous. I'll tell myself how good I am, right?
Yeah.
So, but it comes down to that authenticity and asking myself, why is this what sobriety has taught me? Is this why I got sober? Well, initially I got sober to get rid of the pain, the emotional pain and the physical pain. And I put 2 and 2 together and found out that, like, I had a 7-year bad luck streak. And then I realized it was me and the chemicals. It wasn't everybody else. So that was a big catalyst for getting sober. As time has gone on, I've always been intrigued on certain things, not everything, but certain things that interest me. And so if they do interest me, I'll dig into them because I want to know, not to prove anybody wrong, not to prove anybody right. I'm just curious. I want to know. And I don't want to know it to teach it. I just want to know it because I think it's cool.
Well, to me, what that tells me is again, the disposition of being curious and caring when it comes to human beings. as opposed to being dismissive of something that appears to be different, or just, again, like we don't understand it. We have a different posture towards that. And that's what I really appreciate about what I've always experienced, with you. And again, like you said of me, you don't need to tell me that. I can watch you or hear your conversations, and it becomes apparent that that's just how you are. And it also impacts, although there's those really tough conversations like you had about your daughters. And I'm telling you right now, brother, I share some of that pain with my own kids. And it's just sometimes you got to be okay with a void in information and not quite being able to connect dots. I'd rather just, like you, I'd rather read some journals and read some papers and get the information and dots connected. Well, you can't do that with human beings, And so I really appreciate that. But one of the things that I wanted to end on that you say, and again, you're not a Bible thumper. You're not anyone that pushes anything down anyone's throat, but you do say every day that you hit your knees, but when you get up,
yes, I do.
You say, let's go kick some ass. Right? Which I love that. And I think that probably deserves a little bit of an explanation as far as the emphasis on and getting out and doing some great things. But I want to encourage people that despite their circumstances, like you've basically taken us through a range of things to end. Again, I'll just say it again with your daughters. And is it possible to go out and kick some ass even when you don't have answers? Is it possible to go out and kick some ass even when you know that you have somebody that's keeping you accountable, that's putting you in a place to kick ass? You couldn't do it yourself. Talk to me about that.
Anything I wanted to accomplish in life, I did. Some things took longer because just the process. I could not get sober. I could not, and I tried hundreds of different ways, and I could not get sober. And I have that willpower. And one day when my friend talked to me about it, which was probably the 500th time somebody had talked to me about it, you might want to get some help. I kind of had that. It wasn't a moment, but I started, this whole time throughout all my drinking and drugging, I always still had faith in God, in the God of my understanding. And I never blamed the God of my understanding for my life's position, where I was and what happened. That was of my own doing. But the simplest thing about it was, and when I did it, I didn't even get on my knees when I did it. All I did was I asked for help internally through my soul, my own mind's eye, my connection with my higher power, my God. And it was freely given immediately. And all I had to do was ask. So as years went by and I was sober and life got a lot better, and I reflect back and I'm like thinking, the God of my understanding was always there. He was always there, but he was a gentleman and he didn't intrude where he wasn't invited. And I wanted nothing, like I didn't invite God into my life, my daily activities on a daily basis when I was drinking and drugging, because I was consumed with getting high. Where am I going to get my next dosages? And it's all about me and my ego, and nobody else matters. I'm the most important thing. And then, the miracle happens. It reiterated to me that, man, all I had to do was ask for God to help me, for this to be removed from me, this compulsion and obsession for drink and drug and sticking a needle in my arm and taking 50 painkillers and alcohol and all the nonsense. And it happened. And you know what? It's the first time I did it. All those times that all those other people talked to me, and this friend of mine that had talked to me, the last one that talked to me right before I got sober, somebody I respected very much and still do. I think he had said something more on the spiritual thing of maybe you might want to tap into that. He was very general in saying it. He knew how to handle me without telling me what to do. So I did. And then, you blink your eyes and here you are almost 26 years later sober. And you're like, this life has been absolutely incredible. It's been absolutely incredible. And I don't regret any of it. I don't want to say I'm glad the tragedies happened, but tragedies happen. It's part of life. And it's what you do about the tragedies. It's how do you come back from them? And there were some, like, when my mom died 3.5 years ago, I had a 6 to 8 month really bad time in my life where, thank God, I didn't have to drink or drug or medicate, but I was really, I would say, down and out, like down, like just emotionally and just the light at the end of the tunnel. There was no light at the end of the tunnel. I didn't realize how much of a foundation mom was, even though in the last 10 years of her life with dementia and Alzheimer's, she was really not capable of doing stuff, but she was always mom and she was there, right? So when that was gone, little did I realize how hard it would hit me, because that week of the services and everything, you and I are wired a lot the same way. It's like, okay, it's go time now. Get organized, get structured, make sure things are in order. So there's, respect and loyalty. And then how am I going to carry mom's legacy onward? Right. By telling stories about how awesome her soup was, or telling stories about how she would wrestle me when I was 13 and throw me to the ground. Right. And all this stuff. So it's those kind of things that were all, possible through me just saying, I can't do this. Can you help me? And really inviting and asking for help from, internally. And, the answers came pretty crystal clear on, okay, well, yeah, you got to put one foot in front of the other. And my route ended up going through a treatment center. So I had to be willing to do that work. The answer was there. It was there for me, but I had to do the work. And so every day for 25 years, I've been hitting my knees. And the reason I hit my knees is, in certain religions, they do it. I'm not a very religious person. I'm more of spirituality, more of my religion is how I live. That's how I look at it. How do you live is really what is my religion. But I hit my knees every morning as a physical sign of not submission, but surrendering, and admitting and reminding myself that my best thinking and my best efforts landed me in a treatment center in Detroit, Michigan. And I was like, okay, if all I got to do is, one of the things I can do to hit my knees. And when I pray with my palms up and open to receive. And my prayer is I'd like to say it's this really glamorous, deep, poetic thing, but it's pretty much a prayer and for guidance, understanding, and to be loving and kind to people, to be conscious of what I say to people, and to keep my ego out of it, and to tell the truth. And don't tell white lies. Don't tell white lies. Because one little steroid pill is a white lie, and it leads to injections. It leads to, and that's just, comparing metaphorically an example. Right. It's like, don't tell white lies, because white lies lead to bigger lies. And bigger lies lead to tragedy and pain and hurt and deceit and all these things. And everything I just described, I have been. And today I don't have to be.
That's powerful, brother. Yeah.
And when I get done and I pop up off my knees and the way I talk to my God, and then it's the last thing I say. I said, let's go kick some ass, right? Yeah. And it's just, all it is just my semantics or linguistics or whatever. It's just the language I use. I don't sit there, and when I pray, I don't swear.
No, I got you. No, this is good. This is good.
But it's like, that's how I am.
It's consistent with who you are. And that's why I said it needs some explaining. But the explaining is that, even like team, I don't want to use that word without defining it. So this is the way I'm choosing to define it. Kicking ass, what I just heard, is being humble, receiving, understanding kind of your lane, your position in the bigger scheme of things. And one thing that I'll end with, that Dr. Sifu said, as a PhD, he says, practical solutions don't require a doctorate. So he literally was saying it's just the simple things. It could be hands open, palms up, saying, that I don't get it. I need help. I'm asking. If it's not understanding your daughter, if it's not understanding your wife, your friend, ask the questions in a non-condescending, open, format and posture to where you're going to receive the blessing of that information. and again, this is the side that I knew intuitively about you for a long time. Many, many people probably do, but the goal in this conversation was, and you said it, like, it's just what I had you say when we started this podcast. The conversation's conscious. It's not willy-nilly. It matters. We're digging deep. We're intuitive. And we want people to understand, like, there's certain things that just matter. And the reasons we, know they matter is because when we talk about them, they hit us like a ton of bricks.
Yeah. We talk on purpose. Like, what we talk about, it has a purpose behind it.
That's right.
And, and then a motivation behind it my motivation being of how can I be of service? Because I don't have, like, if somebody were to ask me about something that I don't have experience in about life, I would say, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. I can't even give you suggestions because I've never been in that situation, but I do have a friend that has been, and I can connect you if you want.
Yep.
So I can be of service that way too.
Yep. And that's ultimately humility, because being the guy that's the smartest person in the room always has the answer. You're going to be a lonely individual. The way it was stated by Tony Gonzalez, I heard him on a show. He said his mother let him know that ego has no amigos.
That's a good one. I've never heard that. That is a good one.
And boy, is that true. It's like you just see a space around the egotistical. No one wants to have anything to do with you.
Right.
Like, how am I relevant in your world,
That should be a t-shirt.
Let's do it. Well, hey, man, this conversation went exactly as long as it was supposed to. I don't have time frames. If people are interested, which they sure as well should be, they're going to listen. I really appreciate you taking the time. As I say to everybody, I've just pillaged the one resource you can't get back, which is your time. But at the same time, brother,
I've benefited.
Yeah, likewise.
That's how I look at it. It's like I benefit as much as look, it works both ways.
Absolutely, brother. Well, again, much thanks. You have yourself a great weekend. As usual, you and I will definitely be talking soon, brother.
Absolutely. I'm grateful for you asking me to be on. Thanks, man.
All right, bye.